Hello, folks. Welcome to episode 21 of our podcast, brought to you by the Center for Teaching and Learning here at Humber College. Today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the assumptions underlying serious educational games. And we just want to make some distinctions in the way we speak about this and try to clarify some fundamental concepts today that might not have come out since our podcasts have mostly been about covering journal literature. We haven't presented anything which globally addresses the field in a modern context and puts it into some kind of context for looking at polytechnic education and higher education. So we have this term called serious educational games, which we can say is a SEG. And then we also have what are called serious games, which are called SGs. And again, these are games not about education. And then educational simulations, which are, as the term implies, pure simulations. Now, the work that I'm talking about that we've conducted today has occurred across institutions. Humber College is supporting these podcasts, and we're doing most of our work here at Humber in our different faculties. We also have partnerships with Ryerson University in the area of research, and I've worked collaboratively with and without Humber on Ryerson's projects in the area of serious games. Baycrest Health Sciences as well, which we can see here, which is a leading research unit and education unit in the area of long-term care and geriatrics. And we've done some work with Altered Spark, Dr. Brian Kugelman, who is at the Faculty of Information Sciences at the University of Toronto, who's an expert in behavioral neurosciences. So some of the work we're going to talk about today emerges from some of these partnerships we've pursued. There are three areas in which we've argued that serious educational games are most effective, looking at the literature to date, and that is skill acquisition, motivation, and achievement. And these are the things we want to focus on a little bit more. And when we talk about gamification in this context, most of our podcasts have brought us in the direction of this idea of an emotional cognitive model. And that is where your psychological well-being of the learner, the student, who sits at the center of this hub, has to do with their own self-acceptance, autonomy, environmental mastery, positive relationships, and purpose. So everything we're doing in trying to build out the game world is trying to foster these emotional cognitive elements of being. So we would call this a holistic form of education. And there are different examples of serious education games that we would point you to. But at Baycrest Health Sciences, our early work involved the development of a game called SOS. And we've gone on to win a major award from Longshore Publishing in this area. And this ran as an analog version for a number of years, in which students had to solve various cases and, using a game mechanic, learn how to take care of it. So these are some of the first cohort of game beta testers in the game. And then we eventually produced, with the help of the other partners, this digital version of the game, in which you could just see in the game would have you opening cases, and each of these cases has specific detail, and then as you do it, you can work your way through with the game, making decisions about which kinds of tests to order and which kind of critical paths to develop. And so we call this mobile sticky gamification. And this is the idea that on your mobile device, you're producing a game element, and you can see the interface is very simple. You can take an easy case or a more difficult case, and these are little stars, which give you the number of tests that you can order. So you might want to order any one of a dozen different tests, but which are the ones that you would like to order, because your economy is limiting which tests you can choose. And then this shows your earnings right here, the amount of earnings that you got, because when you get a hard case, you can earn $20,000. Easy cases might earn you $5,000. And what these are power-up stacks in the center. And what a power-up meant is that of these points that are available to choose different tests that you'd want to order, if you're very confident, you don't need to know a lot of information about the patient to solve, you can put them in this little deck here. And when you do this, it'll power up and multiply your earnings. So there's a bit of strategy. And as you can see, mobile sticky gamification gives us a leaderboard in which we can either have the individual or the organization earning virtual coin, what we call a cryptocurrency, from completion rates in the game. So we went on to win this summer the Freedman Award, which is a fairly prestigious award at educational innovation. And these are our partners from Baycrest that helped build us. This is Raquel Meyer, the director for the Center of Teaching and Learning, and this is Jennifer Ragunan, who is the main educator in this field. When we talk about building educational games and simulations in areas as diverse as health sciences or polytechnic education, we want to take into account these days these multiple intelligences of Gartner, what we would call a gamified simulation, multiple intelligence model. So these are different forms of intelligence according to Gartner's original hypothesis. So some of us have strengths in naturalist, some of us has spatial intelligence, some of us has more musical intelligence, linguistic, etc., bodily kinesthetic. So when we produce gamified simulations, we try to address different intelligences in the design so that all the games aren't just about understanding organic processes. All the games aren't about using language effectively, but some games might appeal to others. You know, if we're teaching in a music program, we would build games that address musical intelligence. If we were building a program in fitness, which we have a very big program at Humber here in athletics and fitness, personal coaching, kinesiology type things, then one would develop game models which address bodily kinesthetic learners. So instead of learning styles, inventories, we talk about multiple intelligence and build the game system to treat people in those intelligence. And GameStar Mechanic here, providing credit to them, produced this 5 core design elements in any kind of game. So all these educational games have rules, core mechanics, components, space, and goals. And we can think about this as a formal game design process. And we can draw interprofessional teams. Here was a game we built at Baycrest just this summer in which they have to draw a simulation card and they have to select their care options and then they have to sign off. And eventually the cards are all simulations of different problems that you might encounter in long-term care, and you have to then select health profession cards. So this was a game designed to have interprofessional teams learn to work with a patient. So you would have to make a decision about the actions that you want to do when you see a patient with a difficulty, and then which health professional cards are you going to pick. So you can build very card-based games to build simple things. And a most recent game that we're just finished in beta testing and will be going to full implementation in the next year is called The Grid, and this is a game in which you are managing a virtual hospital, and this was done with several partners in the industry. And effectively you have 4 wards of a hospital, and in Articulate Storyline we produced a number of cases. So as you explore the hospital wards, there are different types of cases located, and the student can explore any ward that they want and do the cases in any order, just like you're living in a regular hospital environment. And again, we've gone through beta with our interns this summer and are just analyzing the data, but they really enjoyed this idea of going through an internship on their iPad and having that enhance what they were doing in the real experience. And this is the idea of a central purchase upgrade hub, which we're using in these games as well, where you can start a case in any order you wish. You can pause a case. You can decide you're not interested in working on it right now. But as you do cases, you get money and the game, and that allows you to purchase upgrades and consults, so you can actually bring in expertise. And so this has been fully approved by the Ministry of Education here in Ontario as an online certificate program in gerontology. Social Media Celebrity was a game run by Ryerson University by our colleagues Rob Bashko and Professor Jagris Hodgson. Jagris Hodgson is now at Royal Roads College, but she was at Ryerson during these studies. And this is when they had to teach social media platforms, and they had to learn about 25 different social media platforms that they had to learn into a term. And what they would effectively do is work in teams, and they would pick a platform they wanted to use, and they would show how to use the platform, such as using Facebook or using Instagram. When they did, they would then sign off and gain experience points, and that unlocked other platforms, so that they learned social media platforms by showing proficiency in each of the platforms. And once they had it, they can then bring it in to any kind of simulation that we threw at them afterward. And then this game started with this 12-sided fuzzy die roll, such as a viral bad tweet. So there was a random element produced in these games, so they had to contend with each week in using social media. And Multimedia Empire, which is a course being a game still being used by Professor Deb Rells at the Ted Rogers School of Management, and she's the director of the Inclusive Design Unit at Ryerson University at Ted Rogers. And essentially what you're doing here is you've got a multimedia company you're running that's been gutted by somebody, by corporate IP theft, and you've got to rebuild this multimedia company by taking on quests, gaining virtual Bitcoin, and buying items which unlock higher level quests. And the interesting thing is that even in her course you can use the Bitcoin to do things like buy extensions on papers and identify abilities to have your essay turned in a week later, etc. So you can actually use the Bitcoin for your interactivity within the game, and your goal in the game is to restore a company to profitability. And Professor Fells reports to me that her course enrollment has doubled since she developed it into a full game. So the entire course is a game, and you're paid in experience points, not grades, but those are converted to grades at the end of the course, in line with university policy. We produced a game recently using these models called Stinko for the Canadian Armed Forces Peer Support Services. This was done as consulting with Dr. Brian Kugelman, who's at UltraSpark as a behavioral neuroscientist. He's also in faculty at the University of Toronto in the area of user design and experiences. And what we were essentially trying to do is teach people here how to identify good and bad landing pages on the web, because every component of a web page triggers an emotional response. So what we essentially gave each group of armed forces participants here was Stinko cards, and they looked at different images, and they had to decide how bad the image looked. So for example, if I gave you some Stinko cards, 5 cards right now, and I presented this image to the left first, and then you had to tell me how bad this is as a website design. And you can see that it's kind of a cluttered page. There's a lot of activities. Hard to know whether it's good or bad, but if you suddenly understand digital design, you could understand the neuroscience behind this. And then we would, and you'd have to put those cards on this particular design. You'd have to decide how many to wager to say this is bad, because you've got only 5 cards. So is this a bad design? Well, you haven't seen this one yet. So we've only got this. So you've got to kind of make guesses based on your knowledge of digital neuropsychology, whether this is good or not, because you don't know what's coming next. Now, the next picture we could show would be this web landing page, and you would decide how many cards to place. So you're making wagers and guesses looking across these at which one is the worst website, and it makes for a very fun and entertaining way to talk about it. And we won't comment on which of these is better or worse. This is just the idea of, again, building a game system to have people learn to apply knowledge of web design and advertising based on neuroscience principles. We've also developed other games that we've run at Baycrest Health Sciences. One was called Hygeia, and this was the idea of using case studies that are introduced each week, and those case studies have to be solved, and when they do, you gain experience points, and eventually you get more difficult cases. So this produces this idea of play, engagement, motivators, and mechanics, in which we get this self-directed engagement flow that we're moving toward. A lot of this work has been in the area of card-based training, and this is work that we did with the Canadian Forces and Elections Canada's Amazon and Intel, and you can see these very simple playing cards that have been designed by using a professional producer to teach these digital behavioral change workshops. So when we think about gamification and development in education training, we don't have to think about using computers. Card games work really effectively. That's about all we're going to cover today. We're going to pick up the thread again in next week's podcast to talk more about serious educational games and examples of how they're implemented and lessons learned. David Chandross from the Center for Teaching and Learning at Humber College signing off. Thank you for watching.